What's going on, guys? This is Jake at That Fit Friend, and 4 things to like about the Xero Shoes Prio include number 1, the price point. For $89.99 USD, I think this is a fairly good price point, especially for a barefoot shoe for somebody who is trying to get more into this style of footwear. If you've never worn a barefoot shoe and like some of the models out there that cost $140 USD intimidate you, I think this is a good price point as like a more hybrid intro shoe to get you into more barefoot style shoes without breaking the bank. The second pro that I like about this model is the overall upper durability. So some of the barefoot shoes that I've tried, especially the ones more focused for like running, for example, have very thin upper constructions. If you're somebody in a lifting setting where you might be having a little bit of toe dragging from something like a burpee, or just any form of friction from whatever equipment you're using on the upper, this model's upper is pretty thick and it should be fairly durable to resist that friction and early breakdown. The third thing that I like about this model is that if you're like myself and if you're gonna be wearing these for primarily your lower body days and deadlifts, this shoe gives you a very close to the ground feeling. So this shoe has a 5.5 millimeter Feel True rubber sole, but if you want to get even closer to the ground, you can remove the insole, which is about 2 millimeters. So there's a finished inside here, so it's not like you're gonna be stepping on that like awkward texture that some shoes have when you remove their insoles, and you'll get even closer to the ground. So if you are doing something like a deadlift and you want maximal ground contact while also wearing a shoe that is very flat, this is a really good model for that. The fourth pro is the overall flexibility of the outsole and the wide toe box. So this is really important because when we wear barefoot shoes, the whole point is to get a lot of proprioceptive feedback from the ground through the mechanoreceptors on our feet. By having a more flexible outsole and a wider toe box, we can allow the toes to fully splay and feel the ground below us. So when we are walking on variable surfaces, for example, this sole is gonna maneuver really well and provide us with a lot of feedback. So that is another pro that I think almost every barefoot shoe should have. And the overall flexibility of this outsole is really great, especially for those acclimating to more barefoot style shoes and training. But now let's dive into a couple of cons I have noticed with the shoe. So when it comes to potential cons with this model, honestly, overall for the price, I think this is a really good hybrid shoe for just lifting and casual runs. But one thing to keep in mind is that if you are new to barefoot shoes, this model is not gonna feel as supportive or as cushioned as your more traditional training shoes. And that's something to really keep in mind because this style of footwear does have an acclimation period. So if you have been wearing training shoes your whole life, you can't just usually go and switch 180 into this shoe full time. It's gonna take a little bit of time to ease into them and to strengthen the foot muscles that may have been underutilized over the last however many years that you've been wearing thicker midsole and outsole shoes. The second potential con I could see folks having with this model is that if you are that very hardcore dedicated barefoot training athlete and you want something that's very minimal in nature, this model actually might feel a little bit bulky for you. Overall, this shoe is lightweight, but if you look at other Xero shoes that are more specifically designed for running, you'll see that the upper construction is actually a little bit thinner in those models. So the upper may feel a little bit bulky for my die-hard, like long distance running, barefoot focused athletes. But overall, those are the main 2 cons I could see folks having with this model. They're very niche in nature, and overall, the shoe has performed exceptionally well across the board. So when chatting performance of the Xero Shoes Prio, we're gonna break this section into a few different parts. I'm gonna talk about lifting, more plyometric, HIIT, and agility training, and runs, just like in all of my other training shoe reviews. Now, in a lifting setting, I think this model excels. I think if you're somebody especially who is acclimating to barefoot style shoes, this is one of the best models to buy and invest in because number 1, it's fairly affordable, and 2, overall the construction features I think feed really well into a gym setting. Plus, with the removable insole, if you are trying to get as flat to the ground as possible, especially for things like deadlifts or any form of lower body movement where you really want to sense the ground and bias where you're putting force into the ground, this is a really good model for supporting that. Plus, like when it comes to stability, you're not gonna have any stability issues with this shoe. So if you are lifting maximally, this is a good bet for you. When it comes to plyos, agility, HIIT training, what I will say is that this model is okay, but like with most barefoot shoes, if you're not used to this style of footwear for that style of training, they may be a little bit uncomfortable, especially if your feet haven't acclimated to supporting that style of activity without as much of like an artificial support under it with a thick midsole and outsole giving you that responsiveness. So if your foot is not conditioned, especially with the 3 arches, to accommodate for being a bit more stiff with plyos, etc., and accommodating your body weight with less material under that foot, that is something to keep in mind. But overall, I think this model is a decent pick for some recreational HIIT, plyos, and agility work. Just make sure you're acclimating to the style of footwear if you're wearing them full time for those activities. When it comes to runs, Overall, I thought this model was decent, and honestly, I haven't taken them for super long distance barefoot style runs. I'm still acclimating myself to barefoot running and trying to work on my gait patterning, but in a shorter run and more of a casual trail run basis where I've worn these, they have been exceptionally well. I like the rubber sole, plus the sole does have a 5,000 mile warranty, which I think is pretty cool, especially if you are somebody who's really pushing the limit outside running in these. But what I will say is this, and I talked about this in the cons, if you're somebody who wants like a incredibly minimalist shoe, you might want to look at the other Xero shoes that are more geared towards running. I've reviewed the HFS before, and overall, I actually like that model's upper a little bit more for running settings. But for my folks who are interested in casual runs or just some daily wear, I think this model will be a really good pick for you. So now let's answer the question, is the Xero Shoes Prio worth it? So I think if you're a lifter or an athlete who is starting to experiment with more barefoot style training and you want a shoe to accommodate those goals, this model is worth it. It has a fairly good price point, and I think if you're only wearing them for the specific activities that you want to start training a little bit more with a barefoot style approach, or even just wearing them on a daily basis with, this model will last a while. So for the $90 USD price point, you should get a lot out of this shoe, especially if you are careful with them when it comes to just how you are using them on a daily basis and in a training setting. When it comes to price in the Xero Shoes Prio, we've already talked about it in this video, but you can expect to pay $89.99 USD. Personally, I really like this price point, especially for somebody who is newer to barefoot style shoes. I think a lot of popular models out there run for like $140 USD, which can be pretty intimidating, especially if you've never worn this style of footwear. So I think $89.99 is a fairly good price point to help acclimate you to the style of footwear. When it comes to sizing and fit in the Xero Shoes Prio, most folks should be safe going true to size. The length is true and the toe box is plenty wide, so even if you do have a wider foot, this model should fit perfectly fine when you go true to size. All right guys, now let's break down the construction of the Xero Shoes Prio. So up here on the toe, we have synthetic layers that go around the entirety of the toe box. Personally, I really like this for durability, especially if you are training and let's say you're doing a burpee or something where you're going to be dragging the toes. This model I think is going to be a little bit more durable than other barefoot shoes out there I've tried with thinner upper constructions. Throughout the entirety of the upper construction too, we have this thicker mesh material. So as you can see, it's slightly thicker than the HFS, which I recently reviewed. And overall, it feels fairly durable across the board. Running up the midfoot, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 eyelets to 6 eyelets back here for lace locking. And overall, the midfoot feels very secure. So despite having like a wider toe box, for example, there's never really any overlap with the upper construction, which is honestly a really nice perk and something you run into sometimes with training shoes. So overall, I really do dig the midfoot construction. And as you can see, we have that more Huarache inspired design throughout the entirety of the shoe, just like in most of the Xero Shoes training models. In regard to the boot once again is pretty thick in nature. When it comes to the upper construction, we have an additional pull tab here, and then the insole does come out in this model. This insole is 2 millimeters thick. You can take that out, and the inside of the shoe is finished. So as you can see, it doesn't look like there's like that weird textured material that some shoes have when you take out their insole. So you can train without an insole in here and get a lot of benefit because you're going to be also closer to the ground. We have a full rubber sole. So this is the Feel True rubber sole that Xero uses in a lot of their models. It's 5.5 millimeters thick, and overall, I really like the flexibility of it. So as you can see, you can pretty much bend it in any way you want, and you're gonna get a lot of ground feedback with it. Overall, guys, I think that's really the gist of the construction of this shoe. It's rather simplistic in nature, and I think that's honestly kind of one of the things that makes Xero Shoes pretty great is that all the shoes are fairly consistent, they're all fairly simplistic, and they all work pretty dang well when it comes to performance and durability. If you have any questions on this construction section or the shoe, as always, guys, hit me in the comments below. All right, guys, that wraps up my review of the Xero Shoes Prio. Overall, I really like this model as like a hybrid training / running model, especially for folks who are newer to barefoot shoes. Their price point is fair, and overall, I have really been digging this model. If you have any questions on the shoe, hit me in the comments below or reach out to me personally, whichever you prefer. And as always, guys, drop a like on the video, subscribe to the channel. I'll see you guys in the next one.